What is up, guys? Fado82 coming at you with the 12th edition of Rust Cribs, in which we take a look at some of the more noteworthy base designs during the past wipe cycle on the US Rustopia server. It's amazing, there's been a dozen episodes of Rust Cribs so far, but as always guys, this episode is not focused just on looking at bases on Rustopia, but it's also here to talk about best practices for base designs, talk about base defenses, and also to talk about how base design is evolving with each iteration of Rust. With each new patch, each new iteration of the game, things change, players adapt, and they're very, very resilient. What you're listening to in the background right now is actually a song called Resilience, and it's very appropriate for what we're looking at right now and also for what we're talking about. What you guys are looking at is a raid that was put together on Dirt McGirt's crew, in which Yar and allies attacked a large-scale compound which was put together by Dirt McGirt and Timnagot. The base design and players were very resilient, and that's a common theme for playing Rust. To play Rust, you have to be a very resilient player. You have to understand that your base will be raided. Not that it might be raided, but that it will be raided, and you have to build accordingly. Rust is a very hard game to describe to people. It's in equal parts a PvP game, a building game, a survival game, and in a sense a base defense or tower defense game. It's a very complex game, and oftentimes footage doesn't do that justice. But there's a lot of moving parts to Rust, lots of different systems in place. And as we're talking about resiliency and base defenses, what we're looking at right now is a base that was put together with Dirt McGirt and Timnagot. Behind this base, which is 3 towers which are put together, is a cylindrical base that was designed by the FFS clan, which is Pharaoh's group, and this compound was structured such that it was prepared for a raid of this magnitude. 250 rockets were brought to this raid. 3 different clans came together to raid this compound, and while they did a ton of damage, they took down that main tower that we're looking at right now, a large tower in the middle of the base. They didn't access any loot rooms or loot rooms that were of any significance, and Dirt and his allies felt as though their base defense was very successful. Taking a look at an eye in the sky perspective here, you can really see the footprint of the base. It extends out from the land into the water, and it takes use of the geography and puts it together in a way that is very, very difficult and hard to really get a sense of when you're in there. When your boots are on the ground as a raider, it's hard to know what's going on in a compound like this. It's hard to call out targets, and some of the things that you guys want to take note of here are those flank towers which are positioned around the compound here. They allow those defenders to gain a vantage point to see what's going on, to call out targets, to see how many raiders are coming, and also to defend from those locations. They're absolutely essential if you're going to be designing a base of any type of scale like this and you're going to be having a compound. You want to make sure you're thoughtfully laying it out in terms of having perimeter towers facing any direction at any given time. This cylindrical base design that we're taking a look at right now was put together by Pharaoh and the FFS crew, and that was behind Dirt's 3 towers here. Note that Dirt had 3 towers here, and the first one took a lot of damage. It looks like Swiss cheese, but the towers behind it remained intact, which are the towers where the lion's share of his loot were kept. There's a small building here which is a bit of a bridge or tunnel, and it allows the members to gain access to the bases without having to get wet. And taking a look at Pharaoh's base here, it's a cylindrical base design that could be used by solo players, but it's a design that is using those perimeter stone walls to really layer it up, which makes it very, very difficult to raid, and it soaks up a lot of C4 and rockets. And now we're moving over to a base that is the base of the raiders who were just raiding Dirt McGirt's base that we took a look at in the initial footage. This is put together by the Yar group, BHC, ZFG, and the A-Team clans. They came together and put their resources, manpower, and time and walled off a large tract of land here and put together an absolutely sprawling compound. This base was also raided. Again, that you can check out a raid cam to see some of that footage, but take note guys of the best practices being used here are those large flank towers, which are important to have in a compound of this scale. Looking at ZFG's base here individually, it's a base that's put together with a central tower and then outer perimeter towers, which are really important. That allows them to defend that base really well. We're taking a look at some of the other aspects here. This is the BHC base. BHC also employed towers around their base. So not only was this compound as a whole really able to be defended well, but the individual bases had their own defenses in place as well. Just because the compound is such a large scale, you don't want to forget about those individual base defenses, and that wasn't lost on the builders in this particular case. There was a Church of the Building Cupboard here, the Building Cabinet, which paid homage to the Almighty Building Cabinet, which gives them protection, and that was a really interesting addition. It's always cool to see stuff like that put together in Rust. And as we take a look here, you'll notice that ZFG put together their clan tag here. There's an outer fallback base or retreat base here out in the water, which is always a good thing to have. This is the Yar compound's base, the Yar group's base. It was put together along the rocks out here. It was the end of the compound here, and that gives them sort of some added protection, but also the ability to spot any raiders that might be taking a path through the water, which typically isn't done, but it can be done, and that's something that you guys want to make note of. Take note of the wall here. This is one of the largest walls that we've seen on Rustopia. It was a sprawling wall that was put together, and it went on and on. The footage doesn't quite do it justice, but it went across a large portion of the map. Inside that wall, the base owners here, the defenders, got really ballsy. They walled off a rad town, which is always a point of contention on a server, and that is something that always draws the attraction of players. Rust with Lou, if you guys are familiar with Rust, check his channel out. He took on this as a challenge. He didn't see it as something that was necessarily bad. He said it's a challenge, and he scaled the wall, and he put together a sign in there that said that this wall is a challenge. It's not an obstacle, but it's rather a challenge, and I have conquered it. Go ahead and check out Rust with Lou's channel. I'll link it in the comments. He's a great dude, and he does some amazing videos. You didn't make a wall, you made a challenge. Certainly words of wisdom from Lou. And this compound again is in line with the theme of resiliency. Dirt McGirt and allies took the fight back to Yar and allies over here, and they brought all their rockets, all their high yield weapons. In line with the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, they came over here and tried to annihilate their enemies, just as the enemies had tried to do to them. Going over and taking a look at the LST compound, you guys will get a sense of the scope of it as we pan out here. Take note of that outer perimeter wall down there on the ground. That's something that is able to really keep that base secure. But taking a look at the eye in the sky perspective here, some of the most notable things are the fact that those towers are so pronounced. Even high in the sky, you can see how those towers are really sprawling and go very high into the sky. These towers allow those defenders to have a viewpoint in any given direction at any point in time. They can also defend in a 360-degree radius in the event that they need to. The tower was put together with Black Ops, Jesus, and crew, and take a look that there's multiple stations in there, so more than one defender can get up in that tower and defend from it if they need to. Taking a look at the main compound down here, you'll notice there's various buildings in various states of construction. The main base here is a cylindrical base that would require a lot of C4 and rockets to raid, and it's a really cool base design. It has at the top of it again a tower with defensive points which members can shoot out of, and notice how many pump jacks and quarries are going in this location. Those are really important to use in your base designs, especially if you're going to be building a sprawling compound. And as we take a look closer at that cylindrical base, guys, take a note at all of the artwork that goes on here. Harmony helped them to put together some of the artwork here. She's the master artist on Rustopia. They've also done it themselves as well. These signs are really important to the overall lore of the server, if you will. They carry over from each iteration of the game, and they're really important. They kind of have a bit of a legacy feel to it, and they sort of tell a story when you look at them. It's really a point of pride for members to have their signs, and it's really a point of disrespect when signs are destroyed during a raid. Lots of hard work goes into it, and I think we can get a sense of that from looking at those cool signs here. As we go ahead and pan back out, just again take note of the structure of this compound, how it was put together in a sense that it's using the geography to its advantage. It has a river to one side of it, which they're walling it off to be able to have predictable paths for raiders, and it was next to a rad town as well. We're now taking a look at the Liberated compound here. I'm not sure what group this is, guys. It may be a newer group on the server. I imagine this as being a group of slaves who decided to leave their masters and go ahead and branch out on their own and put together this compound. That's what I want to imagine it as being. Please fill in the details, guys, if you know more about it in the comments. But again, it's a sprawling base design. They've put together different stations here, which are walled off with the wood spike walls and also the outer perimeter stone walls. And taking a look at it, the perspective from the sky, it has a massive footprint. There's a huge tower here, which has various layers to it. Again, it's a point where they can defend from, and it's really something that you want to employ in your base designs. Taking a look at some of the other aspects here is they use geography really well, and they walled it off in a way where the wall ended where the river started. Taking a look at a sign here, we have a sign for airborne, rangers lead the way. And taking a look again at the compound here as we pan out, guys, it's a really stunning achievement and really beautiful stuff. And now we're taking a look at the Kingsman compound over here. If you guys remember from last week's episode of Rust Cribs, they went a bit crazy with those wood perimeter walls and walled off roads and all sorts of places with that. And again, they were using them here, and as we look at the eye in the sky perspective, you can see that they walled off all of their quarries and pump jacks, which is really important to do because people are going to come in and they're going to raid those for the oil and resources that are in them, and that's something that you guys want to keep in mind. If you leave them naked, they're going to get hit very easily, so try to wall them off and section them off as best you can. Taking a look at their main base here, which is still under construction, you'll notice that it's a base with a central tower in the middle, and then perimeter towers that will be flank towers able to surround and defend that. It's a really great base design, and sorry we couldn't see it completed, but we can see sort of the trend that it was taking, and it would have been absolutely beautiful and very symmetrical in its design. There are other towers here as well, which are important in a compound of this size, and again, just take note of those signs. It's a sense of the ability for members to give themselves their own individual flair, and it sort of adds a living sort of history to the base designs, if you will. Panning back out, guys, again, just look at the footprint, really cool stuff. And as we pan back out here, we're just going to kind of, again, reflect on the nature of building in Rust. The theme for this episode is resiliency, and that's really, I think, a core theme to Rust in general. To be a Rust player, to stick with Rust, you have to be a very resilient and adaptable player. Again, it's a game that's oftentimes hard to describe to people. It is equal parts a building game, a base defense game, a PvP game, a survival game, and sometimes it has a bit of a tower defense type feel to it. It's a very, very interesting game. And as always, guys, really hope you're enjoying Rust Cribs. Please leave us feedback in the comments. As always, Fado82, peace.